We've got a stack of sources in front of us today, and they paint a picture of geopolitical realignment happening at just breakneck speed.
It's incredible. We're seeing U.S. foreign policy ignite two major international flashpoints almost at the same time.
Right. One is centered on resource control and, well, actual military action in Latin America.
And the other is all about resource strategy and a really intense diplomatic confrontation up in the Arctic.
So for this deep dive, our goal is to, synthesize these two things, the diplomatic storm over Greenland and the military intervention in Venezuela.
That's absolutely right. We want to extract the critical insight here. We're focusing on the consequences, the immediate and the long term.
Especially the economic fallout.
Exactly. The economic fallout, the geopolitical ripple effects on huge alliances like NATO, and, what this sudden focus on resource acquisition means for international law.
We're really looking for the so what in all of this,
Yeah.
because the rhetoric and the actions that are coming out of the White House are, they're not just aggressive. They signal a dramatic shift in how the U.S. sees its relationships with everyone, allies and rivals.
And this aggression, it seems to be emboldened by success in one theater, Venezuela, while risking a total collapse in another.
Okay, let's unpack this. And I think we have to start with the incredible tension that's just suddenly engulfed the Arctic, specifically Greenland.
The Arctic situation escalated so dramatically because the White House didn't just state a goal of acquiring Greenland, which is, a semi-autonomous part of Denmark.
Right.
They followed it up with an explicit threat of force. And that is where the diplomatic breakdown really begins.
The official U.S. position is that it's a national security priority. But that wasn't the line that caused the seismic rupture.
No, it was the specific statement. The White House declared that using the U.S. military to acquire Greenland is, and this is a direct quote, always an option.
Always an option. Against a foundational NATO ally. That language isn't just inflammatory, it's a direct threat.
It's arguably the most serious test of NATO cohesion we've seen in decades. The whole principle of the alliance is collective defense, Article 5.
An attack on one is an attack on all.
Exactly. So if the U.S. were to act militarily against Danish territory, well, the Danish Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, she warned it would spell the end of NATO.
And her quote was, "Everything stops, including NATO." That alone should, just halt any geopolitical calculation. But is that statement, the end of NATO, is that just posturing to scare the White House? Or do the sources suggest this is a real existential threat to the alliance?
The international reaction that followed suggests it's deadly serious, and here's why. It sets a precedent that the U.S. values resource acquisition over its own defense pacts.
Mm-hmm.
The response wasn't just Denmark being outraged. We saw this extraordinary joint European pushback. Leaders from the UK, France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Spain, they all issued a unified statement.
And what were they stressing? Was it purely diplomatic, or were they reminding the U.S. of, the basic rules?
They were unified in saying Greenland belongs to its people. But crucially, they stressed the need to uphold the UN Charter, territorial integrity, the inviolability of borders. They're trying to frame this not as a political row, but as a violation of the entire legal structure of the post-World War II world.
So the big European powers are focused on international law. But the local Nordic nations, they sent a different kind of signal, didn't they?
Precisely. The foreign ministers of Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, and Sweden, they put out their own statement.
Okay.
And they reinforced that only Denmark and Greenland decide Greenland's future. But then they went a step further. They announced they had, quote, taken steps to increase deterrence and defense in the region.
Wow, that's not a legal argument, that's a practical signal. They're bolstering their own defenses in the face of this.
It's a clear signal. They're not just relying on the UN. And in the middle of all this, you have the voice of the Greenlandic people themselves.
Right, the sources said there was overwhelming opposition from Greenland.
Yes. Their prime minister, Jens Frederik Nielsen, he called for respectful dialogue. He stressed their status is rooted in international law. But a local sentiment really captured it best. Kalat Nunaat means the land of the Greenlandic people.
It just grounds the whole thing in self-determination. They're not a piece of real estate.
Exactly. They're not a trophy to be won.
So you have the White House pushing this aggressive line, Europe defending international law, the Nordics boosting military deterrence. It seems like the only potential check on this is maybe internal U.S. politics.
Well, you did see how Speaker Mike Johnson downplayed the military action part. He said, I don't think that's appropriate.
But he still acknowledged the strategic value.
Oh, absolutely. He knows the value.
Yeah.
but it shows there's at least some division on the how.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, why the Arctic? Why now? And why is the U.S. seemingly calculating that Greenland is worth more than the cohesion of NATO?
It always comes down to that mix of economic drivers and strategic positioning. The White House is justifying this by pointing to growing interest from, quote, common adversaries in the Arctic.
Russia and China.
Russia and China. But the strategic rationale is really about future economic control. First, Greenland has vast, untapped deposits of rare earth minerals.
Which are critical for everything from defense tech to electric cars.
Everything. And control over those supply chains is immense geopolitical leverage, especially since China dominates that market right now.
So this is about securing future technological dominance.
Absolutely. And second, and this is a huge factor, is climate change.
The melting ice.
The melting ice is opening up new sea routes. Yeah. The Northwest Passage, the Northern Sea Route. This dramatically increases Greenland's strategic value as a military staging point and a hub for global commerce. It links the Atlantic and the Pacific.
So the U.S. is trying to establish total control over a future key resource location and a trade artery. Now, the sources did mention other options, right? Like buying Greenland or a compact of free association.
They did. And those are, on the surface, less aggressive. A compact is a mechanism the U.S. uses with some Pacific islands. Basically, the U.S. handles defense and provides aid, and in return, they get exclusive military access.
A softer way of gaining control.
A much softer way. But the fact that the White House is using the military threat as leverage, while these other negotiations are supposedly on the table, just shows how coercive the whole thing is.
And it speaks volumes that Denmark and Greenland had to make a strong request just to get a meeting with the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio.
Yeah, their previous requests were unsuccessful. They're being forced to respond to threats, not engage in a good faith dialogue. It creates a really dangerous precedent.
That the U.S. is willing to use this kind of rhetoric against its own allies.
To achieve goals defined by resource scarcity. And this whole aggressive posture in the Arctic, it seems to have been emboldened by a successful use of military force somewhere else.
And that's our transition. Let's pivot from this diplomatic crisis to the actual military intervention and the intense fallout in Venezuela.
The contrast is just. It's stark. Risking NATO for resources in the Arctic versus just taking resources via military action in Latin America.
The operation in Venezuela led to the swift capture of President Nicolas Maduro.
Yep, and the U.S. intends to charge him in New York on multiple counts.
And we do have to acknowledge the human cost here. The Pentagon reported 7 U.S. service members were injured.
And Venezuela's military reported 24 of its officers were killed. Meanwhile, you have the new acting president, Delcy Rodriguez, on TV, insisting that no external agent was governing the country, trying to project sovereignty.
But for you, who is focused on the economics, the immediate consequences are just. They're unprecedented.
They really are. President Trump announced that Venezuela's interim government will immediately turn over between 30 to 50 million barrels of high-quality oil to the U.S.
30 to 50 million barrels. That is a staggering economic prize. And the mechanics of how this is being handled are critical. The sources say the oil will be sold at market price.
Right, and the money generated from those sales will be controlled directly by Trump himself.
What does that even mean, that kind of direct executive control over seized state assets?
It is highly, highly unusual. It bypasses all the standard diplomatic channels. It gives the U.S. president enormous immediate leverage over the global oil supply. It's a clear signal that resource control is the primary, immediate goal of these interventions.
It's an enormous move. It relieves domestic pressure and puts huge pressure on rivals.
And the geopolitical fallout is already shattering relationships across Latin America. It's created this profound rupture, maybe best shown by the reaction from Colombian President Gustavo Petro.
His reaction was extreme.
He compared Trump to Hitler. He specifically questioned the rationale for charging Maduro's wife, Celia Flores, calling the whole thing barbarity.
That comparison shows a complete erosion of trust.
It really does. It shows how some leaders in the region view this as a return to, early 20th century interventionism.
But the intervention didn't just shake up Latin America. It immediately raised the temperature with Russia.
Specifically over oil sanctions enforcement right there in the Atlantic.
Right. The U.S. Coast Guard is cracking down on tankers moving illegal oil, including black market Russian crude.
And this is where it all converges. Resource control, great power rivalry, We are seeing kinetic confrontation over illicit trade.
There was that one specific incident in the sources.
A U.S. official reported that Russia sent a submarine and naval assets to escort an empty oil tanker that was evading U.S. sanctions. The Coast Guard was pursuing it out into the Atlantic.
And the tanker crew went to almost like theatrical lengths to protect themselves?
They did. They apparently tried to fend off a boarding, then they quickly painted a Russian flag on the hull and changed the vessel's registration to Russia.
It's like shadow warfare played out on the open seas.
Exactly. The U.S. is applying maximum economic pressure, and Russia is responding with overt military protection. The standoff, a U.S. cutter pursuing a tanker that's being protected by a Russian submarine. It just raises the geopolitical temperature so much.
It increases the risk of a miscalculation dramatically.
What's fascinating here is it's the speed. The speed with which these seemingly separate conflicts, Arctic sovereignty and South American regime change, are converging into these global flashpoints.
And they're all centered on the pursuit of strategic economic resources.
Regardless of the cost. Regardless of the cost to alliances or to international stability.
Absolutely. So for you listening, you now have the full context on these simultaneous pressure points. You've got the diplomatic breakdown over Greenland that's creating an existential crisis for NATO.
The massive specific economic prize of Venezuelan oil now under direct U.S. executive control.
And this heightened direct military confrontation with Russia over sanctions enforcement in the Atlantic. And the common thread through it all is prioritizing resource acquisition.
The sources reveal U.S. actions that are designed to secure these resources and position against rivals, even if it costs them longtime allies like Denmark. And this raises a really important question. In a future defined by this kind of resource competition and great power rivalry, are we entering an era where international law, historical alliances like NATO, are they just considered negotiables, a cost of doing business?
What does the immediate use of military action cited by the White House on Greenland and then actually executed in Venezuela, what does that mean for the stability of global trade and defense pacts moving forward? It really forces you to consider whether the whole structure of collective security is now secondary to the hunt for rare earth minerals and oil. That's the crucial element to keep exploring.